Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Steven here with TB Fork, and this is day 18 of the 80 Days to Your Dream Body course. Today's protein source is going to be beef liver, and today is a legs and abs training routine. And the theme for today's workout is CRAC PNF stretching. So right now, I'm going to be demonstrating how to perform CRAC PNF stretching. Now let's get started. And while we're resting, I'm going to be demonstrating some CRAC PNF stretching for the posterior fibers of the hip. So we're going to be working on the hip extensors. And for the first one, we want to go straight into flexion. So we're not going to be doing anything with regard to abduction or adduction. It's just straight into flexion. And with this one right over here, I'm going to show you a couple of different options with regards to positioning. My preferred method is I like to place the calf on my shoulder. And then what I like to do is I like to lift and then lean forward. And then once I get into a nice comfortable stretch, on the inhale, they will contract the muscle by pushing into me. And then on the exhale, what they would want to do is actively go into hip flexion. So they are going to actively bring their knee toward their same side shoulder. One thing that I like to do is I like to add a little bit of assistance and get them a little bit deeper into the stretch, but you don't need to do that. That's just something that I add myself. And then if you wanted to change up the position, we could just be standing to the side, one hand at distal femur, one hand at the calcaneus, but the same thing. We would take them into hip flexion. Once we've reached a nice comfortable range, we would go ahead and instruct the patient to push their heel into my hand, and then they would inhale, contract. On the exhale, bring your knee toward your shoulder, and then they would actively go into hip flexion. And if you want, you could add a little bit of assistance. When we are performing flexion, just straight flexion, we're working on the posterior fibers and we're working straight on the extensors. The primary muscles are going to be the gluteus maximus and specifically the central fibers. We're also going to be hitting the hamstrings group. The semitendinosus is the middle hamstring, so that's going to be the one that's getting the most stretch. But we're also going to be getting the semimembranosus as well as the biceps femoris and the long head of the biceps femoris, because the long head crosses the hip, the short head only crosses the knee. And then some other muscles will be the adductor magnus. And for the adductor magnus, in this position, we're going to be hitting the posterior fibers. Some secondary muscles, as we get into the injury, you're also going to be getting a little bit of the piriformis. But another stretch that we can do is next, we're going to focus on the medial posterior fibers. For the medial posterior, we're going to go into hip flexion, but we're going to take them out into abduction by 30 degrees. And the positioning is the same. For me, I like to place the gastroc on my shoulder, and then I will come out 30 degrees, and then I will lift, lean, inhale, push the foot into me. They will go ahead and contract muscle. And then exhale, drive your knee toward the table, and they will actively go into hip flexion. And I like to just give a little bit of added assistance, which you can do if you like. And then for the second hand position, same thing. We can just go on a 30-degree angle of abduction. We're going to go ahead and flex the hip. Distal hand at femur. Other hand is going to be at the calcaneus. They're going to inhale, push the foot into you. They're going to contract. Exhale, drive your knee toward the table. And they're actively going to go into hip flexion. And again, if you want, you could add a little bit of assistance to guide them deeper into the stretch. With regard to this stretch right over here, in terms of the main muscles, once again, we are going to be targeting the gluteus maximus, but this time we're going to be hitting the lateral-medial fibers. We're also going to be hitting the adductor magnus, the posterior fibers once again, and the hamstrings group. With the hamstrings group, we are going to be hitting the semimembranosus and semitendinosus. In this position, we're starting to shift a little bit more toward the semimembranosus because the semimembranosus is the most medial of the hamstring muscles. So we're hitting mostly the semimembranosus, and then we're getting a little bit less of the biceps femoris because the biceps femoris is more lateral. So the more we go into hip abduction, the less we're going to be getting of the biceps femoris. And then some other muscles, we are also going to be hitting the quadratus femoris, and that's pretty much it. Our rest period is up. Time for set number 3. That was just a tiny taste of what can be found in my members only section. If you enjoyed it, become a member for only $5 a month to get access to hundreds of member only videos.